The courtroom erupts when a man lunges forward, screaming words no one should ever say out loud. Gasps ripple through the gallery. His black neighbor does not flinch, but his eyes finally lower, like he has heard this before. Judge Judy does not raise her voice. She does not stop him. She lets him talk, because what she is about to say will not just end the case, it will expose him in a way no verdict ever could. But before we begin, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments and hit subscribe for more shocking courtroom moments. The shouting does not fade when the bailiff calls for order. It lingers, sharp and poisonous, clinging to the walls like smoke that refuses to clear. The defendant stands half out of his chair, chest heaving, finger still pointed across the room as if the accusation might escape him if he lowers his hand. His words hang in the air, ugly, deliberate, chosen to wound. A few people in the gallery shift uncomfortably. Others stare straight ahead, frozen between shock and shame. Across from him, his black neighbor does not move. He stands with his hands folded in front of him, shoulders squared, face controlled. No shouting, no gestures. Just a slow blink, and then his eyes drop. Not in defeat, but in something far more familiar. Like this is not the first time. Like this is not even the worst time. Judge Judy does not strike the gavel. She leans back slightly, letting the moment breathe, letting everyone sit inside what was just said. Her eyes move from the defendant's trembling jaw to the quiet man across the room, then briefly to the gallery, where no one seems quite sure where to look. "Sir," she says at last, her voice even, not raised, not sharp. "You have made your feelings very clear." The defendant scoffs, mistaking calm for weakness. "I am just telling the truth. Nobody wants to say it, but I will." Judge Judy tilts her head. "That was not truth. That was an accusation." He laughs, loud and hollow. "Same thing." The neighbor finally lifts his gaze, not to argue, just to acknowledge the sound of his own name being dragged through someone else's mouth. Judge Judy notices. "Let us rewind," she says, "because shouting does not replace facts, and anger does not excuse behavior. You brought this case. You are asking this court for relief, so I suggest you start acting like someone who deserves to be heard." The defendant drops back into his chair, crossing his arms tightly. "He threatened me. I was scared. I did what anyone would do." Judge Judy's pen pauses mid-air. "You were scared," she repeats. "Then explain something to me very carefully." She looks directly at him now. "If you were afraid, why are you the one who followed him outside?" The defendant opens his mouth without hesitation. "Because I wanted to tell him." He stops, just for half a second, long enough to realize what he almost said. Judge Judy does not fill the silence. She lets it stretch, thin and unforgiving. Across the room, the neighbor exhales slowly, as if he has been waiting for that silence his entire life. Judge Judy sets her pen down. "Sir," she says quietly, "I am going to ask you again, and this time, think before you speak." The courtroom leans forward without meaning to. "Why?" she asks. "Did you follow him at all?" The silence Judge Judy leaves behind is not gentle. It presses. The defendant shifts in his seat, jaw tight, eyes darting as if the room itself has turned on him. He clears his throat and tries again, louder this time, more practiced. "He has been a problem for months," he says. "Always watching, always outside. I complained, I called people, nobody listened." Judge Judy does not look up yet. She flips a page in the file, slow enough to feel deliberate. "How many times did you call?" she asks. He shrugs. "Enough." "That is not a number." He sighs, already annoyed. "I do not know. A few. Maybe more. When someone makes you uncomfortable, you do something about it." Across the room, the neighbor's shoulders tense slightly. Not defensive, just bracing. Judge Judy finally looks up. "You called because he made you uncomfortable," she says. "Not because he threatened you." The defendant waves a hand. "Same thing." "No," Judge Judy replies calmly. "It is not." She begins listing dates, not accusations, not opinions. Dates. Each one lands softly but precisely, like a tap that keeps coming back. You called about noise, she says. But there was no noise complaint filed. You called about suspicious behavior. The report notes nothing illegal. You called again 2 weeks later. Same result. The defendant leans forward now. So I am not allowed to feel unsafe? You are allowed to feel whatever you want, Judge Judy says. You are not allowed to harass someone because of it. A murmur ripples through the gallery. The neighbor keeps his eyes forward, breathing measured, as if this list is something he has memorized in his own way. Judge Judy turns to him. Sir, when did this start? He answers without hesitation. The week I moved in. The defendant scoffs. That is not true. The neighbor continues, steady. I waved. He went inside. After that, it was notes on my door. Looks. Comments. What kind of comments? Judge Judy asks. He hesitates, just briefly. Not fear. Calculation. Deciding how much truth the room can handle. Questions about why I was there, he says. Who I was visiting. If I belonged. The defendant laughs again, sharp and dismissive. Oh, come on, that is not harassment, that is curiosity. Judge Judy's eyes lift slowly. Curiosity, she repeats, is silent. What you are describing sounds persistent. She turns another page. You filed 3 complaints, none were sustained, and yet you escalated. I protected myself, the defendant snaps. The neighbor finally turns toward him. His voice stays quiet. You followed me. You filmed me. You stood outside my house. The room stills. Judge Judy looks up sharply. You filmed him? The defendant hesitates. For evidence. Evidence of what? She asks. He opens his mouth, closes it. The neighbor adds softly, there was one day you did not record. The day you said the worst things. Judge Judy's pen stops moving. Off camera, she says. The defendant looks up fast. That is not what happened. Judge Judy does not argue, she simply leans back again. Then, she says, this is the moment you should explain. The question hangs in the air longer than anyone expects. Judge Judy does not rush it. She watches the neighbor closely now, not like a judge weighing facts, but like someone listening for what has been swallowed too many times. You said there were comments, she says. I want you to tell me why none of this was reported when it started. The neighbor shifts his weight slightly. It is the first visible crack, not fear, fatigue. Because every time I thought about it, he says, I asked myself if it would make things worse. The courtroom feels smaller. Judge Judy nods once, slow. Worse how? He exhales through his nose. Being labeled, difficult, aggressive, a problem. The defendant rolls his eyes. That is ridiculous. Judge Judy does not look at him. You will wait. The neighbor continues, voice steady but lower now. I work early. I come home late. I did not want police cars outside my house. I did not want my kids asking why people were staring. A few heads in the gallery drop. So you stayed quiet, Judge Judy says. Yes. And what did staying quiet cost you? She asks. He swallows. Peace. The word lands heavier than shouting ever could. He describes the small things. The mailbox notes that never crossed into threats but never stopped. The way his neighbor watched from the window when he parked. The comments disguised as jokes, always said just low enough to deny later. I started changing my routine, he says. Different times, different routes. I stopped sitting outside. The defendant scoffs again. You are acting like a victim. Judge Judy turns to him sharply. He is describing impact. You are describing inconvenience. Do not confuse the two. The defendant opens his mouth, then closes it, arms tightening across his chest. Judge Judy looks back at the neighbor. And the day this exploded, what changed? He pauses longer this time. My son, he says quietly. He asked me why the man next door hated us. The room does not move. Judge Judy's expression shifts, not anger, not pity, recognition. I realized silence was teaching him something, the neighbor continues. That this was normal, that you endure it. The defendant shifts in his chair, suddenly restless. Judge Judy folds her hands. So you came here? Yes, he says, not to punish him, just to stop it. The defendant laughs, brittle. Stop it? You are trying to ruin me. Judge Judy looks at him with calm disbelief. Sir, if the truth ruins you, that is not sabotage, that is consequence. She turns back to the neighbor. Why now? She asks. Why not keep enduring it? He meets her eyes. Because enduring it was hurting more than confronting it. The courtroom absorbs that. Judge Judy nods slowly. Thank you. She turns the file toward herself, fingers resting on the edge like she has found the seam she was looking for. Now, she says, lifting her gaze to the defendant, we are going to talk about why this did not stop, until it reached my courtroom. The air shifts the moment Judge Judy turns another page. Not fast, not slow, just enough to signal that something has changed. You said this began when he moved in, she says, eyes still on the file. You said you were reacting, responding, protecting yourself. The defendant nods eagerly, relieved to be back on familiar ground. Exactly. Judge Judy looks up. Then help me understand why your behavior escalated after every complaint was dismissed. His smile tightens. Because nobody took me seriously. No, she says calmly. Because nothing illegal was found. The distinction irritates him. That is the same thing. Judge Judy does not correct him. She simply slides the file closer to herself as if weighing it. Let us talk about escalation, she continues. You say this was about fear, about safety, about feeling threatened. Yes, he says quickly. She taps the page once. Then explain why the language you used got worse after authorities told you there was no threat. He shifts in his chair. I was frustrated. Frustration does not create new beliefs, Judge Judy replies. It reveals existing ones. The neighbor watches quietly now, something like caution creeping into his posture. He has not seen this part yet. He knows it by instinct. Judge Judy flips the page. Interestingly, she says, you were not the only person who complained. The defendant leans back, confidence returning. Of course not. People talk. Judge Judy nods. They do. She looks directly at him. One of the complaints came from someone else on your street. The defendant smiles. There you go. I was not alone. Judge Judy's eyes narrow just slightly. She complained about you. The smile freezes. The room does not gasp. It does not react. The silence is immediate and complete, like the power has been cut. What? The defendant blurts. Judge Judy holds the file up, not theatrically, just enough. Same dates, same period, different direction. That is impossible, he says quickly. Nobody complained about me. She did, Judge Judy replies, and she used many of the same words you did. The defendant laughs nervously. That is ridiculous. Judge Judy reads calmly. Aggressive tone, repeated confrontations, filming, standing too close, creating discomfort. Each phrase chips something loose. The defendant's laugh fades. Who? Judge Judy does not answer right away. She lives 2 houses down, she says instead. She looks like you, same background, same demographic. The neighbor's eyes lift sharply now. Judge Judy continues, voice steady. She described feeling targeted, intimidated, watched. The defendant shakes his head. She is lying. Judge Judy looks at him. She said the same thing about you. The words land clean, no force, no anger. The defendant opens his mouth, then stops. His fingers grip the edge of the table. Judge Judy leans back. So now we have a problem, sir. She folds her hands. Because if everyone else is lying, The only constant in these complaints is you. The defendant's breathing grows uneven. Across the room, the neighbor does not smile. He does not react. He simply sits there, finally understood. Judge Judy lets the silence do its work. This, she says quietly, is the first crack. And the defendant knows it. The defendant does not sit with the silence. He fights it. This is unbelievable, he snaps, leaning forward, palms flat on the table. So now I am the bad guy? I am the one on trial here? Judge Judy does not react. She waits until his voice runs out of momentum on its own. You are not on trial, she says calmly. You are explaining your behavior. There is a difference. He shakes his head, irritation boiling over. This is what people do now. They twist things. Suddenly I am the problem because I spoke up. The neighbor remains still, eyes forward, jaw set. He has learned that responding too quickly only feeds this kind of anger. Judge Judy looks at the defendant steadily. You did more than speak up. You pursued. You repeated. You escalated. I defended myself, the defendant insists. Anyone would. No, Judge Judy replies. Many people would have stopped when they were told there was no threat. He scoffs. Easy to say when you are not the one living next to it. Judge Judy raises an eyebrow. Living next to what? The defendant hesitates. You know what I mean. No, she says. I do not. And that hesitation tells me everything. The defendant leans back, crossing his arms tightly, a defensive posture he cannot seem to escape. This whole thing is being blown out of proportion. Judge Judy glances at the neighbor. Sir, how does it feel hearing that? The neighbor answers without looking at the defendant. Like it always does. Like I imagined it. The words land harder than accusation. The defendant snaps back. See? That is manipulation. Judge Judy cuts in, sharp but controlled. No, that is exhaustion. She leans forward now, closing the distance just enough to shift the energy. Here is what you do not seem to understand. Arrogance sounds confident until it is challenged. Then it becomes defensive. The defendant's face reddens. So what? I am just supposed to accept being uncomfortable in my own neighborhood? Judge Judy nods once. Yes, if discomfort is the only thing happening. He opens his mouth to argue, then stops, realizing how thin his ground has become. Judge Judy continues. You do not get to turn discomfort into justification for harassment, and you do not get to hide intent behind emotion. She pauses, letting the words settle. Now, she says, glancing down at the file again, there is something else we have not discussed yet. The defendant stiffens. Judge Judy looks up. You said you never crossed a line. She taps the file once. Tell me, she asks evenly, do you remember what you said to him on the day you were not recording? The defendant's jaw tightens. The neighbor exhales slowly, as if bracing for impact, and the courtroom waits. The defendant does not answer right away. For the first time since he walked into the courtroom, his mouth opens with no sound behind it. His eyes flick briefly toward the floor, then back up, searching for something steady to grab onto. I do not remember every conversation, he says finally. Things get said. People exaggerate. Judge Judy nods slightly, as if she expected that exact response. That is interesting, she replies, because the words you say you do not remember seem to be the ones that mattered most. The neighbor does not look at him. He stares straight ahead, jaw tight, hands clasped together so firmly his knuckles pale. Judge Judy turns to him. I want you to tell me what was said that day. Slowly. Only what you remember. The defendant shifts in his seat, already shaking his head. The neighbor inhales, then speaks. He told me I did not belong there, that people like me make neighborhoods unsafe. He told me to go back where I came from. The courtroom does not react loudly. It reacts inward. Judge Judy's face does not change, but her eyes sharpen. The defendant laughs, thin and defensive. That is not how I meant it. Judge Judy looks at him. Meaning comes after words. Impact comes first. She turns back to the neighbor. Was anyone else present? Yes, he says. A neighbor across the street. She walked away when it started. Judge Judy makes a note. And that was the day you did not record, she says, glancing at the defendant. He bristles. I am not required to record everything. No, Judge Judy replies, but you chose to record when it benefited you, and you stopped when it did not. The defendant leans forward again. This is turning into a character attack. Judge Judy meets his gaze. Your character is what brought us here. She pauses, letting the room absorb that. Words, she continues, do not disappear because they were not recorded. They become evidence when they explain behavior. The neighbor finally looks up, eyes steady but tired. I did not come here because of one sentence, he says. I came because of what those sentences added up to. The defendant opens his mouth to interrupt. Judge Judy raises a hand. Not sharply, just enough. You have talked a lot today, she says, and every time you talk, you give me more context. The defendant swallows. Judge Judy leans back slightly, folding her hands. And context, she adds, is what separates fear from prejudice. She looks at him directly now. You were not reacting. You were reinforcing something you already believed. The room feels heavier, slower. The defendant shakes his head, quieter now. You are twisting this. Judge Judy's voice stays calm. No, I am listening. She glances down at the file again, then back up. And the more I listen, she says, the clearer the pattern becomes. The defendant stiffens, sensing what is coming next. Judge Judy closes the file gently. Before we go any further, she says, I want everyone to take a breath. The courtroom does, because something has shifted, and it is not going back. If you were sitting in that courtroom, would you have spoken up sooner, or stayed silent to protect yourself? The shift is subtle, but it is unmistakable. The defendant tries to sit back the way he did before, arms crossed, chin lifted. But the posture no longer fits. It looks forced now, like armor worn too late. Judge Judy studies him in silence, then speaks with quiet precision. You have said this was about fear. You have said it was about safety. So let me ask you something simple. He nods, eager again. Fine. When was the last time you crossed the street to avoid him? She asks. He blinks. What? If you were afraid, she continues, you would avoid contact. Distance yourself. That is what fear does. The defendant shifts. I am not going to run from my own neighborhood. Judge Judy nods. Exactly. The word lands harder than expected. That, she says, is not fear. That is entitlement. The defendant's voice rises. So now I am entitled for standing my ground? No. Judge Judy replies evenly. You are entitled because you believed your comfort mattered more than his peace. The neighbor remains quiet, but his breathing changes. Slower, deeper, as if something inside him is finally being named out loud. The defendant shakes his head rapidly. You are psychoanalyzing me. Judge Judy does not flinch. I am observing behavior. She leans forward slightly. Fear avoids. Control confronts. The defendant laughs, too loud. This is ridiculous. But the laugh does not convince anyone. It fades before it finishes. Judge Judy turns to the neighbor. Sir, when he followed you, what did you feel? The neighbor thinks for a moment. Not afraid, he says. Alert. Judge Judy nods. There is a difference. She turns back to the defendant. You mistook his calm for weakness, and when he did not react the way you expected, you escalated. The defendant interrupts. That is your interpretation. Judge Judy raises a finger, stopping him mid-sentence. No. That is the pattern. She pauses, letting the word echo. Every time he stayed quiet, you got louder. Every time authorities told you there was no issue, you pushed harder. That is not self-defense. That is control slipping. The defendant's hands begin to move restlessly now, fingers tapping the table. His eyes flick toward the gallery, then back. "You think you know me," he snaps. Judge Judy's response is immediate and calm. "I know what you have shown me." The room feels tight, focused. Judge Judy glances down at the file again, then reaches for something beneath it, something thinner, separate. The defendant notices. His voice drops. "What is that?" Judge Judy does not answer right away. She lifts the document just enough for herself to see it clearly. Then she looks at him. "Before I open this," she says quietly, "I want to be very clear." The defendant swallows. Everything changes after this. And for the first time all day, he does not argue. Judge Judy does not open the document right away. She lets it rest on the desk, one hand covering the corner as if keeping it from speaking too soon. The courtroom seems to lean toward it, drawn by the weight of whatever is inside. "You have been very confident today," she says to the defendant. "Confident that your version of events was the only one that mattered." He swallows. "Because it is the truth." Judge Judy nods slightly. "Then this should not trouble you." She lifts the document. It is not thick, no dramatic stack of papers, just a few pages clipped together, clean and ordinary. That somehow makes it worse. "This," she says, "is a written statement submitted by the neighbor you claimed walked away." The defendant stiffens. She never spoke to anyone. Judge Judy glances up. "She spoke to me." The neighbor's eyes widen just a fraction. He did not know this either. Judge Judy continues, voice calm, controlled. "She describes hearing you follow him down the sidewalk. She describes the volume of your voice, and she describes specific words." The defendant shakes his head immediately. "No, that is not possible." Judge Judy reads without looking at him. She wrote, "He kept saying the same thing over and over, louder each time, like he wanted someone to hear." The defendant's face drains of color. Judge Judy turns the page. "She also notes that you stopped recording when she stepped outside." The room holds its breath. "That is a lie," he blurts. "She is mistaken." Judge Judy looks up now, eyes sharp. She is a retired school principal, 30 years, no disciplinary actions, no history of exaggeration. The defendant's mouth opens, then closes. Judge Judy lowers the document slightly. "You believed control came from the camera," she says. "You believed if there was no recording, there was no proof." She pauses. "But what you did not consider," she continues, "is that witnesses do not need batteries." The neighbor finally looks at the defendant fully now, not angry, just present. Judge Judy sets the document down. "This is the moment your narrative ends," she says quietly. "Not because I disagree with you, but because the facts do." The defendant's voice cracks. "You planned this." Judge Judy nods once. "I listened." She leans back, folding her hands. "I let you speak. I let you explain. And while you were focused on defending yourself, you forgot something very important." The courtroom is silent. "You forgot," she says, "that truth does not need permission to show up." The defendant slumps back in his chair, hands trembling now, control gone. Judge Judy looks at him steadily. "Now," she says, "we are going to talk about who you really are, when no one is recording." And the power in the room shifts completely. The defendant stares at the document like it might disappear if he looks long enough. When he finally speaks, his voice is different. Quieter. Stripped of the swagger that carried him through the first half of the hearing. "This is being taken out of context," he says. "You do not know what it is like to feel targeted." Judge Judy does not respond immediately. She watches him closely, as if waiting for the rest of the thought to catch up. "Targeted," she repeats at last. "By whom?" He gestures vaguely. By people who do not respect boundaries. The neighbor's jaw tightens, but he stays silent. Judge Judy leans forward just slightly. Sir, boundaries protect space. They do not give permission to invade someone else's. The defendant exhales sharply, frustration leaking through the cracks. You are making me sound like some kind of monster. No, Judge Judy replies. I am letting you sound like yourself. That lands harder than any accusation. He laughs again, but this time it is thin, brittle. So I am just supposed to sit here and accept this version of me? Judge Judy tilts her head. You have been presenting a version of yourself all day, calm when it helped you, loud when it did not, concerned when questioned, dismissive when challenged. She pauses. Masks work until pressure is applied. The defendant's face flushes. You are enjoying this. Judge Judy's voice stays even. I do not enjoy watching people unravel. I do enjoy watching the truth surface. The neighbor finally speaks again. His voice is steady, but there is something firmer underneath now. You are not being attacked, he says. You are being seen. The defendant turns toward him sharply. You do not get to talk like that. Judge Judy interjects immediately. He absolutely does. She turns back to the defendant. And notice something important. He is not raising his voice. He is not insulting you. He is not threatening you. The defendant opens his mouth, then closes it. That, Judge Judy continues, is what restraint looks like. The defendant shakes his head, hands trembling slightly now. You are all twisting this. Judge Judy does not argue. She lets the statement sit, unsupported. Silence stretches. Then, suddenly, the defendant snaps. You think I wanted this? He blurts. You think I woke up one day wanting to be the villain? The outburst surprises even him. His shoulders slump immediately afterward, like he has said something he did not plan to admit. Judge Judy's eyes sharpen. No, she says quietly. I think you woke up believing your fear justified your behavior. The defendant's breathing grows uneven. People like him make everything harder, he mutters. The words slip out before he can stop them. The room freezes. The neighbor's eyes lower again. Not in defeat, in recognition. Judge Judy leans back slowly. There it is, she says, not triumphantly, sadly. That is not fear, she continues. That is belief. The defendant stares at her, realizing too late that the mask did not fall off. He took it off himself. And now everyone can see what was underneath. At this point, do you feel justice closing in, or does the damage already feel too deep to undo? The defendant does not sit back down right away. He stays half forward in his chair, elbows hovering, as if retreat now would mean surrender. His face is flushed, eyes sharp with something that looks like anger, but burns closer to panic. You are twisting my words, he says. I never said I hated anyone. Judge Judy studies him carefully. Hate is loud, she replies. What I am hearing is something quieter. He scoffs. Oh, here we go. Fear, she continues unbothered. Fear that wears authority like armor. The defendant laughs sharply. You think I am scared of him? Judge Judy tilts her head. I think you are scared of what you cannot control. The neighbor sits motionless, listening, not defensive, not satisfied, just present. Judge Judy leans forward slightly. You followed him, you filmed him, you confronted him, not because you were afraid, but because he did not behave the way you expected. The defendant shakes his head. That is not true. She does not argue, she explains. When people are afraid, they avoid, they lock doors, they leave situations. You did the opposite. You inserted yourself, repeatedly. The defendant's hands clench. I stood my ground. Judge Judy nods once. Standing your ground implies someone is advancing. He was walking home. The courtroom absorbs that quietly. The defendant exhales hard. You are making me sound obsessed. Judge Judy meets his eyes. I am describing fixation. That word lands differently, colder, more exact. The defendant's voice rises again. So what, I am just supposed to ignore things that make me uncomfortable? No, Judge Judy says. You are supposed to question why discomfort turns into accusation. The neighbor finally looks up. His voice is calm, but there is weight behind it now. You never asked my name, he says. Not once. The defendant turns sharply toward him. That is irrelevant, Judge Judy responds instantly. It is not. She looks at the defendant. You did not see a neighbor. You saw a category. The defendant's mouth opens, then closes. His breathing becomes uneven. I am not a racist, he says quickly. Too quickly. Judge Judy does not react to the word. I did not ask you to label yourself, she says. I asked you to explain your behavior. She pauses, then adds, people who are secure do not need to dominate the narrative. People who feel threatened by losing control do. The defendant rubs his hands together, a nervous motion he cannot hide now. You are overanalyzing this. Judge Judy shakes her head slightly. No, I am simplifying it. She gestures gently toward the neighbor. He stayed quiet to survive. You got louder to feel powerful. The contrast hangs heavy. The defendant swallows. I just wanted things to go back to normal. Judge Judy's response is soft, but devastating. Normal for whom? The defendant has no answer. The neighbor looks away, eyes glistening, not with triumph but with the exhaustion of finally being understood. Judge Judy glances down at her notes, then back up. We are almost done, she says. But before we are, there is one more thing I need you to understand. The defendant looks up, wary. And when you do, she continues, this case is going to feel very different. The courtroom waits. The silence after Judge Judy's last words does not feel empty. It feels spent. The defendant sits back now, finally still, as if the fight has drained out of him. His shoulders sag, no longer squared for battle. The room does not rush to fill the quiet. Even the gallery seems to understand that something fragile is settling. Judge Judy looks down at her notes, then closes the folder gently. Not with finality, with care. This is the part people misunderstand, she says, her voice lower now. They think being right feels like victory. The defendant looks up slowly. It does not, she continues. It feels like loss. He swallows hard, eyes glossy but unfocused. I was just trying to protect myself, he mutters. Judge Judy nods once. That is what you told yourself. She turns slightly toward the neighbor. And you, she says, were trying to protect your life from becoming smaller. The neighbor shifts, emotion flickering across his face. Not relief, something heavier. I did not want to win, he says quietly. I just wanted it to stop. The defendant's jaw tightens. He finally looks at the man he has spent months confronting without ever truly seeing. I did not think it was that bad, he says. Judge Judy's response is immediate but gentle. That is the cost of being convinced you are right. You stop measuring harm. She leans back, folding her hands. You believed your intent mattered more than his experience. That belief allowed you to escalate while telling yourself you were reasonable. The defendant shakes his head slowly, as if replaying moments he no longer recognizes. I lost people, he says. Neighbors, friends. Judge Judy nods. Because righteousness isolates. It does not connect. The courtroom remains still, absorbing the weight of that truth. The neighbor looks down at his hands. I lost time, he says. Peace. Comfort in my own home. Neither man looks at the other now, both staring at different versions of loss. Judge Judy allows the silence to stretch. She does not rescue it. This court cannot give either of you back what was taken, she says finally. But it can acknowledge what happened, and that matters. The defendant exhales shakily. So what happens now? Judge Judy does not answer immediately. She looks at both men, one exposed, the other exhausted. "We are not done," she says. "But before I rule, I want you to understand something." She pauses, letting the room lean in. Justice is not about proving who was right. It is about recognizing who was hurt. The defendant's eyes close briefly. The neighbor straightens, as if bracing for what comes next. Judge Judy reaches for the gavel but does not lift it yet, and the weight of what is coming settles over the courtroom, unavoidable and earned. Judge Judy finally lifts the gavel, but only enough to rest it in her palm. She does not strike it, not yet. Her voice, when she speaks, is calm and steady, carrying without effort. "This case was never about one argument," she says. "It was about a pattern, and patterns tell the truth people try to avoid." The defendant sits rigid, eyes fixed on the desk. He does not interrupt, he does not nod. He simply listens, as if movement might shatter what little composure he has left. "You repeatedly targeted your neighbor," Judge Judy continues. "You followed him. You filmed him. You confronted him when authorities told you there was no threat. And when your behavior was questioned, you escalated with words designed to intimidate." She pauses, letting each sentence land on its own. "That is harassment," she says. "Not fear." The neighbor exhales slowly, shoulders lowering a fraction. "Not relief, validation." Judge Judy turns slightly toward him. "You were entitled to peace in your home. You were entitled to exist without being treated like a suspicion." The neighbor nods once, eyes shining but steady. Judge Judy looks back at the defendant. "You are responsible for the impact of your actions, regardless of the story you told yourself while doing them." The defendant swallows. His voice barely works. "I did not mean for it to go this far." Judge Judy does not soften the truth, but she softens the delivery. "Intent does not erase harm. It only explains why you ignored it." She sets the gavel down gently. "Here is my judgment," she says. "You will pay damages for harassment. You will cease all contact. No filming, no following, no communication of any kind." The defendant nods faintly, as if each word is a weight being added. "And understand this," she adds. "This ruling is not punishment, it is boundary." The courtroom stays silent, focused. Judge Judy looks between both men. "You do not have to like each other, but you will respect each other's right to live without fear." The defendant's eyes brim now. He blinks rapidly, holding himself together. Judge Judy leans back slightly. "I am not finished." The room tightens. "This court can order behavior," she says. "It cannot order understanding. That part is up to you." She looks directly at the defendant. "What happens next will define you far more than what brought you here." The defendant nods again, smaller this time. Judge Judy reaches for the gavel once more, but she does not strike it yet. "Before I close this case," she says quietly, "there is one more thing that needs to be said." And the courtroom waits, knowing this final line is not about law at all. Judge Judy does not raise the gavel yet. She sets it down gently, as if the weight of it deserves restraint. The courtroom feels different now, not tense, not volatile. Heavy in a quieter way, like the storm has passed, but the ground is still soaked. "There is something courts do very well," she says. "We draw lines. We define consequences. We say what behavior will not be tolerated." She looks at the defendant, who sits motionless, eyes fixed somewhere between the desk and his own hands. "But there are things the law cannot fix," she continues. "It cannot undo months of anxiety. It cannot give someone back the comfort they lost in their own home, and it cannot make people understand each other if they refuse to look honestly at themselves." The defendant swallows. His voice, when it comes, is barely there. "I did not know it hurt him like that." Judge Judy nods slowly. "That is the danger of certainty," she replies. "It convinces you that your perspective is the only one that matters." She turns toward the neighbor. "And you," she says, "should never have had to prove your humanity in a courtroom." The neighbor shifts in his seat, emotion finally reaching his face without restraint. "I am not looking for an apology," he says quietly. "I am just tired of carrying this alone." The defendant's shoulders tremble. He wipes his face quickly, embarrassed by the tears he can no longer stop. "I thought if I admitted anything," he says, "it meant I was everything you said I was." Judge Judy's response is calm, almost gentle. Accountability is not an identity. It is a choice. The words settle deep. The courtroom remains silent as both men sit with their own realizations, one exposed, the other validated, neither triumphant. "This is what justice cannot fix," Judge Judy continues. "It cannot erase pain. It can only acknowledge it. What you do with that acknowledgement determines who you become next." The neighbor nods slowly as if absorbing permission to finally exhale. The defendant stares at the floor. "I have a lot to think about," he says. Judge Judy nods. "You should." She lifts her gaze to both of them. "This case ends today, but the consequences of your choices do not." She picks up the gavel again, holding it this time with quiet finality. "Before I close this," she says, "I want you both to remember something." The room leans in without realizing it. "Justice is not loud," she says. "It does not humiliate. It does not seek revenge. It draws a boundary and leaves you alone with yourself." The defendant nods, tears falling freely now. Not from fear, but recognition. The neighbor straightens, shoulders back, dignity intact. Judge Judy raises the gavel slightly. "One strike," she says. "That is all justice needs." The gavel pauses in midair, and the entire courtroom holds its breath. Before you hear the final strike, ask yourself, does accountability feel like punishment, or like the first step toward change? The gavel comes down with a single controlled strike. Not loud, not angry. Final. The sound ripples through the courtroom and then disappears, leaving behind a silence that feels earned. No one moves right away. Even the bailiff seems to hesitate, as if standing too quickly might disturb what just settled. Judge Judy lowers the gavel and rests it beside the file. Her work is done. "This case is closed," she says evenly. The defendant exhales, long and shaky, like someone who has been holding his breath for far too long. His shoulders slump, the last trace of resistance draining away. When he stands, he looks smaller than when he arrived, no longer armored by certainty, no longer protected by excuses. He does not look at the neighbor as he gathers his papers. He cannot, not yet. Across the room, the neighbor rises slowly. His posture is straight, deliberate, not victorious, grounded. For the first time since the hearing began, his face softens, not into a smile, but into something close to relief. Seen. That is the word that hangs around him now. Judge Judy watches both men for a moment longer. Her expression is calm, but there is fatigue behind it, the quiet weight of someone who has spent a lifetime witnessing human failure and still believing accountability matters. She speaks once more, not for the record, but for the room. "Respect is not about agreement," she says. "It is about restraint, and dignity begins when you stop deciding who deserves it." No one responds. They do not need to. The defendant nods faintly, eyes fixed on the floor, absorbing words that will echo long after today. The neighbor turns toward the exit, pausing briefly, not to look back, but to breathe. The air feels different now, lighter, honest. As people begin to file out, the cameras power down. The murmurs return, subdued, thoughtful. This was not entertainment, it was reckoning. Judge Judy gathers the file and stands. For a brief moment, she looks at the empty space where both men stood. Then she turns off the light. The courtroom empties, leaving behind nothing but quiet, and a truth that does not fade when the doors close. Because arrogance always believes it is invisible, until the day truth turns on the light.